What's up, Hoopers, and welcome to Triple Threat. I am so excited for today's show. There is so much to talk about. We are less than 10 games away from the NBA playoffs, the best time of year outside of March Madness. I've been very invested into March Madness, as I usually am. My bracket is, I would say 75% cooked, but my final four is 75% accurate. St. John's, I let the New Yorker in me pick you, and you failed me miserably, but that's okay. I would pick you over Florida every single time. But we, again, have so much to talk about. Brad and Zach will be joining me in just a little bit. We're going to dive into the breaking news of Carmelo Anthony's Hall of Fame induction, soon to be Hall of Fame induction. I'm so excited to talk about that. We're going to talk LaMelo. We're going to talk the Phoenix Suns. We're going to talk Ja Morant. Of course, we're going to talk Draymond Green, the gift that keeps on giving. But you know what? I'm actually on his side when it comes to this specific conversation. You'll find out what I mean later on the show. But right now, we're going to dive into something that's not really a take. It's just more of, come on, bro, really? So in case you missed it, with all the amazing basketball that was going on last night, the Atlanta Hawks played, and it wasn't even about what was happening on the court. It was happening on the court with a non-player. During halftime or a commercial break, you know, they do those contests, if you've ever been at a basketball game, where fans can win money, whether it's draining a half-court shot or preparing some sort of drill and seeing how the fans work through that drill, if you will. And one fan went in very confidently and ended very miserably. Take a look at this.
And then they are ready for the take 5 more change tic-tac-toe game. Now, this is a basketball game, so we had to add some basketball in it. They have to make a layup in order to get a game piece. Once they grab their game piece, they'll place it on the board, and the first to get all 5 game pieces or tic-tac-toe will be our winner. So, James, Daz, are you ready? All right, then tic-tac-go!
Tweet from the guy who fell in that competition. He said not to put a point on it, but slipping during a layup contest during the halftime show at a Hawks game in Atlanta and tearing my ACL before I even scored a point on television. Oh, with television cameras, captured it all as a baddie MC got flustered is my literal nightmare. I don't mean to laugh, but I have a little bit of a dark sense of humor. I get it from my dad. Hi, Dad. We laugh at some of the craziest things sometimes, things that most people would be like, why are you laughing at that? My mom says that to us all the time. But come on, man. You had one moment and it's like you slip before you even get a shot up. My favorite thing is the announcer kind of going, oh no. And then the other guy either being so just nonchalant about what just happens to his competitor or being oblivious. He just kept going full speed. He's like, I'm leaving here with something. And just because you went down doesn't mean that I got to care. And then they walked over, the guy's there holding his knee. It was kind of like that, Family Guy episode where Peter like hits the ground and he's like, oh, what is knee? I just cannot believe you had your one shining moment and that's how it ended. But you know what? Players mess up too. I wish him a speedy recovery. Tearing your ACL is no joke. And speaking of no joke, this show is no joke. And as I promised, it is going to be jam-packed. You don't want to miss a second because when we come back after this break, we're going to have a full house as Zach and Brad join me. So don't move. Welcome back, everyone, to Triple Threat. And as promised, we got a full house. We got Brad, we got Zach, we got chaos on the way. And speaking of chaos, the sun continues to set in Phoenix. That is not a pun. I know they're the Phoenix Suns, but it really is setting. Devin Booker recently spoke with The Ringer, and he was talking about the shortcomings and the recent struggles of the Phoenix Suns. I wouldn't even say recent. I feel like it's just been happening for a while, just in different ways. And he said, quote, "It's upsetting when you're playing with this type of talent, you expect a championship." Here's the quote right here. But fans shouldn't feel like that means Devin Booker is going to give up on Phoenix, because he did also add this: it's not always greener on the other side. People always want to leave their situation and end up in a worse situation, and then they go missing. You'll never have the love like you have by the team that drafted you. And he ended or added also in that conversation, "I'll never be in a rebuild again." Now, it's interesting, right? Because I don't know if that was a little Kevin Durant shade, because
don't start.
But you could read it that way.
Whether indirectly,
because it was greener when he went to the Warriors,
right?
And then it was greener from the Warriors. I want to do it on my own without Steph Curry, and that has been the missing part. He went missing in Brooklyn. He went missing in Phoenix. He's sort of been chasing since,
right?
But I definitely don't think that was a literal.
I don't know if it was. Yeah, it wasn't a literal jab. It was a subtle. What's the word? Intentional or unintentional? Is that a word?
Unintentional.
Yeah. Unintentional. There we go. Jab.
He didn't think in his head when he said that.
Yeah, he wasn't thinking about Kevin Durant.
But we can sit back here and then wait a minute.
Yeah, he's generally alluding to what Kevin Durant did.
Yeah,
you go chasing.
basically.
You go chasing.
Devin Booker is very much a student of the Kobe Bryant game. He speaks about how much Kobe Bryant was a mentor to him. He speaks about how much of Kobe's philosophies he's applied to his own career. The same thing with Jason Tatum. This is a very Kobe Bryant thing to say, because Kobe spent his entire career with the Lakers, although there were reports that he kind of was strong-arming them behind the scenes and threatening a trade if they didn't get him more talent. He never left Los Angeles, started his career and ended his career with LA. So it's interesting that Devin Booker has the same mindset, or maybe it's not if you've been following Devin Booker's career. But speaking of Kevin Durant, now that we have the news surrounding him that he's going to be ruled out for the next 3 games with an ankle injury, and with the overall struggles of the Suns right now, they're currently 1.5 games back of the Kings for that 10th spot in the West, which is crazy when you think about all the talent on the Phoenix Suns and the conversation that we're having. When we talk about Kevin Durant, it's been a lot of conversation, whether he will remain in Phoenix, whether he'll leave. KD himself has kind of alluded that, if it happens, it's not in my control. There have been reports that KD would be willing to stay if the entire make of the Phoenix Suns change. Now, that's interesting because you can only move 2 pieces if it's not Kevin Durant, and that's Bradley Beal, no trade clause, shout out to his agent, or Devin Booker, who's under the age of 30, who you could still potentially do something with. So, Zach, fill in this blank for me. KD's time in Phoenix was...
So the first thing that came to mind was disappointing, but I feel like that's too easy of a cop out of an answer. Yeah. So I'm just gonna go with and say bummer. Was a bummer? What was a bummer? I wanted it to work out. I'm a KD fan, absolutely.
Same.
I'm a big Brad Beal fan. Shout out to the Florida Gators. Shout out to win a national championship in a few days.
Okay.
Just let that. We're NBA shops, so let's keep that going. But I thought that it would, because just from they didn't have the bench pieces. They didn't have around. I thought that they would at least be top 3 in the West when it was constructed, because I figured they would find a way, because Brad Beal, you put him around even more stars than the biggest star he was with when having John Wall. Yeah. I thought that they would find a way, because that's so much offense. And I still do think if they were able to stay healthy in the beginning when they had a full year, I think that it would have been different.
And Brad, you can be the tiebreaker here. I never thought this situation was going to work. It was too similar to what Brooklyn's problem was. And I would even say worse than what Brooklyn was, because at least Brooklyn had some role players. You had younger versions of Kyrie, James Harden, and Kevin Durant, even though not by much, but too top heavy of a team in Phoenix. They're in the Western Conference at that. And the league's different now. You can't just win with a big three anymore. That's not how the league is constructed.
Big two. See, that's the problem.
I'm not doing Bradley like that. I'm not doing Bradley like that.
Listen, so if we're going to talk about this honestly, like if you probably can't even win with a big three and nothing behind it, but you certainly can't win with a big two. And you have to be honest about what Bradley Beal is. You at least have to have a true big three. And they didn't. And so I think if I like the fill in the blank thing, he says, bum, those are the right words. Bummer,
you don't think
disappointing.
A healthy Bradley Beal is a big three?
No.
And you don't think of Bradley Beal when he came over from the Wizards?
I don't know if I agree.
It's diminishing returns on whoever the third person is. Like Kevin Love was not the Kevin Love of Minnesota. So when he's in Cleveland, so you end up getting such diminishing returns on that third person, especially when they all three play the same way. Like Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal are hugely similar players. You're even getting probably a little bit of diminishing returns on the second one, and it gets exponential from there.
No, I can agree with that, but I'm saying just player for player, if you were just looking at this on paper, three big names, obviously Kevin Durant is the biggest of the three, but three big names, you would associate that with a big three. There's always, when you have three people, there's always going to be, we talked about this when we did the Destiny's Child example, there's a Beyonce, that'd be Kevin Durant, there's a Kelly Rowland, that's Devin Booker, and then there's a Michelle, and that would be Bradley Beal. Michelle's important. She's just not as important as Kelly. She's not as important as Kelly and Beyonce.
Yeah, but that's the whole band. You don't need a 12-person band. So, like, that's the whole band.
Hey,
so,
tell that to the Rolling Stones.
And again, the thing with Bradley Beal is when you're looking at him through the prism of a second round, partner up with John Wall, not be a championship threat, he's a great player. But in terms of we're now going to go win a championship with this guy, he's pretty one-dimensional. He's a scorer. Bradley Beal's a scorer. Bradley Beal's a guy. Didn't he win a scoring title? He was very close, if not.
Really close.
Average over 30 a game and watch. This guy's a scorer. So if you take away half his points, there's no way that he's bringing up the defense, the playmaking, all those things to become a big three. All you're getting is a diminished Bradley Beal.
But this is one of the reasons why I disagree with Zach, where I never thought that this team would work, because offensively, if we were just playing 3-on-3, sure, they might be world champions right now if it was just about who can put up the most points. But the problem is they play no defense. There's no one to alleviate any of the pressure from those guys. They have to play an exorbitant amount of minutes during the regular season. Kevin Durant is almost 40, well, not almost, but he's closer to 40 than he is to 25, and you just need more, and they did not have more, and they never got more. And I think when you're talking about the West, now if this was an Eastern Conference team, we'd be having a different conversation, I believe, just because of how discombobulated the East is.
They would at least be able to be top six,
or even a play-in.
Well, certainly a play-in.
Yeah, but in the West, you can't construct a team like this. This was never going to work.
Okay, we've seen runs. We've seen runs where they've had times this season where you see them and they reel off 5 of 6, and you're like, oh, okay, like this is what it should be. And it's at those times when they've been clicking a little bit, granted for like 2 weeks max at a time, that makes me think, okay, like this is what y'all should be, and it should be sustainable, because like it just
the
like
sustainable word is where you lose me.
And I think that it should, because I think that the three of them are all dogs and competitors, and I think that they have the want to and the will. Like for me, it's not a lack of effort or anything of trying, because I think sometimes when things go wrong, you're like, okay, we're not clicking, we're not getting together. But I think that like as a unit, a people person wise, like they rock together, and they should have been better than what they are. And it's still kind of like, that's why I'm just bummed.
Yeah.
Okay, so you
Zach, Brad, tiebreaker before we go to break. You're the tiebreaker here.
Well, listen, the concerning thing was in the early part of the season, he said they've had stretches where they were winning, it looks good, but they were winning by a thread. They were winning. So every one of their like first 10 wins was Kevin Durant or Devin Booker doing something in like the last 2 minutes. They were winning all these clutch games, very low point differential. So it was like, this is probably not sustainable. But if you guys are both Kevin Durant backers, I think he's a top 10 player ever. Unbelievable.
Absolutely.
But if you want to have an honest conversation about why the Suns don't work, It's not just the depth. It's not just the defense. There is an element of Kevin Durant's game, and Devin Booker falls in this camp as well, that is unflammable. And what I mean is he's always going to get his. He can always play a methodical game, get to the elbow, get to his mid-range spot. He's always going to score, but it doesn't always spread to the rest of the team in the way that Steph Curry's points do, in the way that Luka Doncic does, where the whole team ends up becoming flammable on your heater. Kevin Durant, for the most part, has been isolated to his production. Only time it changed is when he went to Golden State, and that system enveloped him, and his greatness then became exponential and spread to others. So if you're going to have two unbelievable players, like, say, the Warriors are trying to do with Jimmy Butler and Stephen Curry, that greatness has to then rub off on the other players and make them levels above what they are. Kevin Durant has never really made the players around him way better than they are without him. He's just great himself.
Okay. Listen, we will have this conversation, I am sure, again on this show. But when we come back from the break, we're going to switch gears to another team in the Western Conference, the Memphis Grizzlies. And things are getting a little wild out there. Welcome back to Triple Threat, everyone. And before the break, we dived into the drama in Phoenix. But that's not the only team in the Western Conference that is dealing with some drama. The Memphis Grizzlies can also be added to that conversation. Now, an anonymous, we always love when a sentence starts off with an anonymous. Because, like, put your name to it if you're going to say it, but that's a different conversation. An anonymous NBA GM doesn't think that you can win many playoff series with Ja Morant as your best player. Here's the anonymous picture.
Oh, my God.
Does he sell tickets? Yes. Is he a top 25 player when healthy? Yes. Can he win multiple series as the best player? No. Not sure. Most years you can win even one. Plus, he's always hurt. We're going to dive into that before we dive into the situation with Taylor Jenkins. For people who are unaware of what happened, the Memphis Grizzlies fired their head coach Taylor Jenkins, the Grizzlies' all-time wins leader with less than 10 games remaining in the NBA playoffs. We'll dive into some of the theories as to why that may be, but first let's talk about Mr. Anonymous and his feelings towards Ja Morant. I remember once upon a time an anonymous GM had the same quote-ish about Luka. You can't win with Luka. I remember our very own Bill Ryder, we talked about this when I was on Beyond the Arc, had the same conversation. He said there's been a lot of conversations between GMs and executives. They don't believe you can win a championship with Luka. So I remember this kind of narrative circulating once upon a time about him. Here we are now with Ja Morant. Brad, do you agree or disagree?
No, I disagree. You're right. I remember when Devin Booker was an empty stats guy, when he was getting 70 on a bad Suns team. I remember when Peyton Manning couldn't win in the playoffs, and then he won a Super Bowl. I remember when Dirk wasn't a guy you could build a championship around.
Was that by anonymous too?
I mean,
maybe it's the same guy. Maybe it's the same guy who just
maybe it's Nico.
he wants to trade for Ja, so he just throwing that out so he can get Ja's
Galaxy brain
to save his reputation.
You know, there's fundamental problems with Ja Morant, and I always have this hesitance, and I went so far as to put this label on Giannis before he won. I said I didn't think you could win with him as your best player. It is difficult when your primary creator, ball handler, lead guy, however you want to phrase it, is a guy that has to get downhill, has to get into the paint, doesn't have the pull-up threat. In today's game, you almost have to be able to come off. It's why we really can't take what Josh Giddey is doing in March in Chicago seriously, because as soon as teams force him to not make just stand still, we're going to leave you open three-pointers like you're Ben Simmons, he doesn't have the ability to pull up. And that ability to pull up off the ball screen is what shapes so much of modern NBA offense. Even though the Grizzlies have gone to sort of a wheel offense where they're always replacing one guy and moving, they don't do so many pick and rolls, fundamentally, there is a problem with Ja Morant being your best player and not having that pull-up as a threat. But I've also seen him completely dominate playoff games. Yeah. I've also seen them be very close in a second-round series. The injury part can be applied to anyone until they're not injured. I wouldn't agree with this.
I think for me, the only part that I can entertain, I do think the injury aspect for me, one of the things I was always concerned about with Ja Morant, even when he came into the league, dynamic player, athletic player, but sometimes because he's so athletic and he's so dynamic, he doesn't always make the best basketball decisions with his body. And I don't know if it's because he's used to always driving the paint, driving to the basket. I haven't seen him really develop what I would like in terms of a mid-range game, a beyond the arc type game. He relies heavily on getting to that basket, getting the and ones, being crafty. It's a part of his game that I love watching, but it also reminds me of Allen Iverson in that aspect. And it's one of the reasons Iverson, although he was playing in a slightly more physical era, it's one of the reasons his career didn't last as long as it could have. The same thing with Derrick Rose. That was very much Derrick Rose's game, except I do think Derrick Rose was a better shooter than Ja Morant is currently in this stage in his career. You don't think so?
I can't give you that.
No, I have to look at the numbers. I'll tell you what.
Mid-range,
the Ja Morant last night
maybe
against Golden State, if he could shoot like that, he can't sustain that. But you see stretches of it.
Often.
Yeah.
Always, his safety net is always to rely on his body. And Ja Morant's not a big guy. You can do that if you're a Giannis. You can kind of get roughed up down there if you're a Giannis. But with a Ja Morant, I think for his longevity, he has to add multiple lanes to his game. And I think that's the only thing that concerns me for him as just an individual player. I absolutely think you can win with him. I just need him to change and mature his game a little bit in that aspect.
Zach,
I think he knows that, though.
I'm going to ask you this because she mentioned Iverson, Derrick Rose. Nobody in their era would have said you can't win with those guys.
No,
right.
yeah,
So
exactly.
it's because it's a different game.
Yeah.
It's all about shooting now because he's basically the same player as those guys.
Yeah, he's not like a brand new photocopy of a player that we've never seen before.
Right.
Like we've seen
there's aspects that are
Westbrook, young Westbrook.
Yeah. And I think he knows that maybe the way his game is currently constructed right now, that he needs to like stay off the ground. He needs to like, that's why he even came out and said, "Oh, I'm not dunking this year," whether he was like joking or serious. There probably was some seriousness to that. And I think that like 1,000% you can win with him. He just needs a system to fully fit what he can do. And I don't think that this year with the offensive, you're doing less pick and rolls and less dribble handoffs and stuff. I don't think that's for him. And that's why we're maybe seeing like the
Do you think the team is for him? Because there was a point in time, and I was on the Grizzlies train for a while. I said it reminds, one reason I love this Grizzlies team, it reminds me a lot of ways in a college team and the intensity that they play during the tournament specifically, except they are a lot more constructed in terms of how they approach the game. They don't make as many mistakes as you sometimes see in college, but they have that same level of tenacity, right? But as the seasons have gone on, I've become less and less sure about this Grizzlies team as constructed as I was seasons prior. Like, I used to think that this Grizzlies team had a chance.
Like they were next.
They were next up. And now it's like, I feel like they get further and further from that vision every single season in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. That's why the last part of that anonymous quote is the most important. It's injuries. You know, they haven't been with you lose a guy like Brandon Clark, who's a nasty offensive rebounder, is maybe your best substitute player, maybe your best reserve, but certainly your best reserve big. You lose guys like that. Ja Morant has not been able to stay consistently in the lineup. I still think that this Grizzlies team, I think the disappointment part of it is that however long ago it was, I can't remember the exact year, but they were the 2 seed, and I think they played the Warriors in the second round, and that was when it was like they're next, and they've never taken that step forward. But I don't know that they haven't taken that step forward because we've, sort of Ja has been exposed as a guy you can't win with, or the system is wrong, or even the coach is wrong, if that's what the franchise is trying to say. I just think it's injuries. They haven't been able to stay healthy. I'm
glad you mentioned the coach because, Zach, there was a lot of speculation about what led to Taylor Jenkins firing. And one of the theories is that Ja Morant was unhappy with Jenkins and the offense. Now we might have a little bit more information on that specific theory. Ja Morant right now is averaging a career low in touches this season, and that's did not sit well with him, allegedly. The quote said this season, Morant is averaging career lows in touches, average touch length, and dribbles per touch this season. Morant's 22.4 points per game is his lowest scoring average since 2020-2021. His second season and his field goal percentage, .448, is the worst of his career. That didn't sit well with him, and he voiced his frustrations publicly and privately, sources said. So when you hear this, Zach, and we look at the standings right now, again, the Grizzlies are still in playoff contention. Let's make that very clear.
They're in the playoffs.
They're in playoff contention. They're in the playoffs. Obviously, the Timberwolves are knocking at that door, but it's not like they free-falled all the way to the bottom of the standings. And when they did go on their losing streak, Zach, it's important to note Ja Morant was not on the floor for a bunch of those games, and you're bound to lose some if Ja's not there. Taylor Jenkins, does this add more to maybe why he was fired?
Well, I think overall they have been a disappointing team, given that, like, okay, so basically Taylor Jenkins almost fires all of the assistants after the year, and you bring in new blood because last year was disappointing. So you come into this year thinking, okay, this needs to be the year to turn it around and you get healthy, and like Ja has no suspension or anything. Like, it's just like, let's just come play ball. And I think that they lost so much of like that allure and the aura that they had when they seemed like the bad boys, but who were also having fun at the same time. Like, oh yeah, like we're the young boys out here and we're gonna dance and we're gonna come out here and like they like that edge was lost. And I think that like that's not like a basketball stat, but something like mentally they just don't have that feel. And I think overall that's like a coaching situation that they don't have that aura.
But when we talk about Taylor Jenkins, we're talking about a coach that is the most winning coach in Grizzlies history. And it's, again, this is not a team that was underperforming this season. They were in the playoffs. They're still in the playoffs. And they were winning games when Ja Morant was off the floor. Not as many as they were when he was on the floor. But you take any star player out of a lineup for an extended period of time, you're bound to lose some games.
Especially, Ashley, against the good teams. And that's where the problem with it, you have to dig a little bit beneath their record and look at their record against above 500 teams.
And they're in the Western Conference, which is the more stacked conference of the two.
Right, but exactly. So it's not exactly fair to say the record's good, they're in the playoffs, everything was good. They haven't been able to beat the good teams. And to Zach's point,
against some good teams, Tom Thibodeau's still my coach.
Okay.
Just saying.
We'll see in 3 years if the Knicks
going a deep playoff run.
Again, we're going to see in 3 years when you're stuck in the second round like the Grizzlies have been.
I just think it's crazy to fire a coach that you have.
Well, that's a different conversation.
Yes.
We started this with can you win with Ja. I think Zach's point was good about his ability to function and that sort of. It's something that we see around the league. Kenny Atkinson went to Cleveland and asked Donovan Mitchell, you're not going to control the ball as much. Take a step back. Steph Curry has long taken the ball out of his hands. We have seen over the years this heliocentric offense of a guy like Trae Young or Luka Doncic or James Harden with Houston controlling everything, teams moving away from that. And Ja might not be a player that you can do that with. That can't be a league-wide thing. If Donovan Mitchell's been able to do it, most guys that can function better without the ball are a real threat to shoot.
Okay.
Ja Morant, as much as that has become more in trend in the league as a whole, I'm not sure with Ja Morant you can just take the ball out of the hands and expect him to be the same player.
All right. Well, we're going to see what happens with the Grizzlies. As I mentioned, we are less than 10 games away from the NBA playoffs, so we're going to be seeing a lot more of these guys and having a lot more of these conversations. When we come back, we're going to talk about Brad's favorite player, Draymond Green, of course. Don't move.
One era always think that the other era is sorry until you leave the game and have an appreciation for the talent that you had to play against.
I disagree in the fact that these eras don't respect us. Like, I've seen several guys talk over and over and over again, not in a positive light. I don't think that respect is passed down to us from the other generations, but I think people are quick to say, oh, you got to respect them because they came before. I don't agree with that.
You absolutely have to absolutely respect the people who came before you, because
my respect is earned, and what you did to somebody else don't necessarily earn you respect.
Hey, Draymond comes from the school, don't start none, won't be none. It's an interesting conversation because I feel like it's been circulating through NBA media more than ever as of late. Steph Curry, LeBron James, and Kevin Durant had that sit down, and they expressed their appreciation for the current players and their skills and said that when they retire from the game, they won't be, quote, bitter old heads. Carmelo Anthony, who we'll talk about in just a little bit, also defended the new generation, saying that players should be able to express themselves and play their game the way that they want to, regardless of how it differs from the past. So I have been on the side, yes, I understand you have to respect your elders, and I do think that in order to have an appreciation for what the game looks like now, you have to appreciate what it looked like in the past. But old heads be hating. So I'm on the side of Draymond Green. I don't know if I'm on the side of like your respect is earned. I do believe that you should always just give people simple respect just as people. But like if you're going to keep throwing shots at me, whether it's me directly or just my generation, yeah, you're a hater. I'm with him I'm kind of on his side, which is very rare for me to say, but
well, because people love to hate. Like that's number one. Like as a human race, like we get so much.
Don't say
enjoyment.
We, just say you.
We know every single person, and if you say no, you are lying. People enjoy being able to throw shade. They enjoy being able to throw jabs here and there,
yeah.
because that gets you like excited in things.
Look,
so like
while you're talking, we're gonna show some known haters as our producer Sharon
and it's fun,
them.
you know, like hate. You know, like that, like that's what it's about nowadays, and everyone likes that because like this is not like a basketball NBA specific.
Hey, take Ernie out the mix. X his face out. Ernie is not a hater, and neither is Kenny the Jet.
Every generation loves to just act like, oh, well, we did it better back here. My music was better here. We dressed better then.
Yeah.
So, like, for the NBA, it's no different. And, like, salute to thank you for, okay, y'all did this to pave the way where we can now make more money because you did this. But, like, we got it for here. We're going to do it how we want to. Y'all did it how you wanted to. And, like, there's always going to be clashing.
The music is funny because my parents do that to me sometimes. I'll be listening to a song and they'll say, this is a sample. They stole this song from back in 1980. I'm like, okay, and?
Right.
Like, what's your point?
Thank you. I like this current song. Like,
nothing's original anymore. Everyone's always, like, calm down. Relax. Like...
I'm Team Draymond here. No question.
Is it because he's a Golden State Warrior?
No.
Okay.
I usually go again. I mean, when he's choke holding people, and you know, I'm usually not one to defend Draymond. He gets on my nerves like everybody else. But he's totally right here. I don't think it's the right way to put it that respect is earned. It's a respect. Like if it's in a friendship, if it's in a marriage, like it goes both ways.
Right.
It has to go both ways, and it does not come the way from some. It's not everyone, some notable mainstream media, but yeah, by and large, there is too quick of criticism to be placed on. They don't play in a physical era. It's soft. It's jump shooting. These are way too general of identifications of today's skill sets. I dare you to go watch 1980s basketball and tell me that basketball is that Steph Curry, because someone giving him a little chicken wing. Give me a break. The physicality is so overrated because there's some clips that make the rounds of hard fouls. But by and large, throughout the course of the game, all this like idea that every time you ran through the lane you got a rib broken is insane. Half the guys couldn't dribble with their offhand.
Fair.
Nobody could pull up off the dribble from 25 feet.
Fair.
It wasn't spaced the same. There wasn't illegal. There was illegal defense. So the guys couldn't. LeBron James, when he's facing a modern defense, the guy can stand halfway between him and his man in a gray area where you're constantly in this state of doubt. Like Michael Jordan knew if a guy was coming, you couldn't go halfway. If you come to a double team, then I pass. If you stay with your guy, I shoot. It was very easy to decipher. It's just like football now with zone blitzes and all these exotic coverages, dude. The defense now is better than it used to be. I don't care about the physicality. The athletes are better. And to not be willing to recognize that and just say, nah, the old stuff's better is just, I'm total team Draymond here.
Well, you're team Draymond, as am I, as is Zach, and I'm also team Carmelo Anthony because he has been notified officially that he will be elected into the Hall of Fame class of 2025. Carmelo Anthony made 10 All-Star appearances, 6 All-NBA teams in 19 seasons to go along with 3 Olympic gold medals for Team USA. Here are his career numbers. Here is his career resume. Also, we can't forget that he won a national championship with Syracuse, where his son Kiyan Anthony will now continue the legacy of the Anthony name. Also, the 2013 NBA scoring champion, NBA 75th anniversary team. I am a diehard Carmelo Anthony fan. I have loved him since I was a little girl. I am a huge supporter of everything that he does. He is such a nice guy. I've met him several times. I got a chance to meet him Summer League for the first time. Here we are at a dinner that he hosted for his new podcast. And he's just been able to really develop a career post basketball, but also still maintain such a imprint in basketball. I am so excited for him. I am so happy for him. He deserves this. I don't care that he's never won a championship. Stop bringing it up. Carmelo's resume speaks for itself, and now he's a Hall of Famer.
2 things that I wish and hope that one day the Nuggets and Carmelo can have a reconciliation and that they will love him the way that they should love him in Denver, and that he'll be able to step in there and get all the love that he deserves. Like I want that, number one, and I wish he could have had a better send off from the NBA, like an official, like, because it was like he still could play. Like, are you gonna come back? Are you not gonna come back? And I feel like someone that great deserves to have, like, maybe not a Kobe level tour, but to have like a send off of like, hey, now I'm leaving, or like let him come back one more year when he still was like on the tour and someone pick him up. Those are the 2 things that I wish.
I wish that he had a better exit from the Knicks too. That was hard because how we got there.
I'm totally Hooper. Like all these guys, people talk about hoopers. Like Carmelo Anthony, that's why all basketball players love him. Total hooper. The unfortunate part of the end of his career is he became the talking point, the poster guy for the move into the efficiency era. It's like if Allen Iverson would have retired when we were moving into this era.
You're talking about when Melo was like, come off the bench, who?
Russell Westbrook has gone through the same thing where we've forgotten how great he was when the game was a little bit different and only judged him by a game that now prioritizes 3-point shooting and pure efficiency. And sort of Carmelo became that guy to point to of saying you can't win when you catch at the block and jab step and shoot 45% and 35%. He's sort of like a better Julius Randle. That's how people tried to frame him, and it's not even close to true. One of the best in the guys that I've personally seen, easily one of the 5 best pure scorers I've ever seen. Kevin Durant. I'm starting to put Steph Curry there. Just pure scorers.
Yeah.
Couldn't stop him. Throw the ball to his spot, let him go one-on-one. It's incredible.
If you haven't read his memoir, I really recommend that you do read it. It was a great read. I enjoyed it. I know that Baltimore will claim him, but he's a Brooklyn-born kid.
I've always wondered about that.
He's from Red Hook. He was ours first.
Born in Baltimore, but raised in New York?
He was born in Brooklyn, and he lived there until he's around 7, and then he moved to Baltimore. So Baltimore likes to claim him.
They raised him.
But Brooklyn had him first. When he came to the Knicks,
I gotta go Baltimore.
When he came to the Knicks, we played a video with J. Cole's "I'm Coming Home." New York is his home.
Yeah, his hometown where he was born, but from 7 on, if you got raised there,
I don't care. I will fight Baltimore to the death for Carmelo Anthony. All right, he belongs to us. When we come back, we are going to have a very heated debate probably about Paul George, because I posed a question on my social media and we got a lot of answers, and those answers are very divided. I'll let you know what I'm talking about after the break. Welcome back to Triple Threat. And before the break, I teased our In the Bag or In Your Bag segment. And this week's question brought a lot of different answers. I'm talking about, we got about 400 responses on this, and it was completely divided.
I'm trying to cheat.
All right, so don't cheat, Brad. All right, so when you think of Paul George, Okay. What team do you associate peak Paul George with? That was this week's question, and the answers were very interesting. So let's dig into the
Fresno
bag.
State?
And it's messed up. Our first one, low-key OKC. If it wasn't for Giannis's monster season, he'd have an MVP. He carried the blank out of us that year and hit nonstop clutch shots while playing DPOY defense. So let's go through all the answers before we give ours. Give me the next one here. Pacers, and it's not close. All right, let me see the next one. I said Pacers originally, but I think Thunder might be up there. He was top 3 in MVP voting. Next, 2018 OKC Paul George was special. And I think this is our last one. Pacers for sure. He needs to go back there. That's interesting coming from Toronto Celtics. I wonder what that means, but that's a different conversation.
Maybe he grew up in Indy from 7 on, but was born in Toronto.
Okay,
so it's like, you know, which one are we claiming?
All right, now that we got those answers, very divided. And when you go through the mentions of that particular question, I'm telling you, it was tweet after tweet after tweet. And the only answers were OKC, Pacers. People threw some podcast P jokes in there, some Fresno State jokes in there.
Honestly,
we weren't gonna put those up. Somebody said, does he no longer play for the Pacers? You're late, bro. So when you guys think of peak Paul George, what team do you associate him with?
Pacers easily.
Easily? I don't know if it's easily.
Because for me, it's like, you can get into the numbers and when did you finish higher in MVP voting and all those things. And yes, that's fine and dandy. But I think that, like, if the question is, who do I associate your peak with? That's like, when did you have like the basketball community in the biggest of an uproar? When were people talking about you the most?
What's a bigger uproar than being top 3 in MVP voting?
He arrived and he hit the stage like out of nowhere with the Pacers. Like, I associate the greatness with the PG-13 and everything. That's with Indiana. So like the feelings that I elicit of, like, when I think, okay, Paul George, it's a Pacer first. And if I think about him as a Pacer first and not with the Thunder, despite the great numbers with OKC, that's why I gotta rock with it. Yeah, it's Indiana. That's his peak. That's when he made his name for himself.
Best answer in triple threat history. I can't say it any. That's the best way to put it. When you have the community, the NBA world in the most of an uproar. That is a great way to put it. And that MVP season, yeah, you're right if you go dig into the stats, but that's sort of the point. You actually have to dig into the stats.
No,
you do. You do. You have to. I'm reminding you, he was pretty good. Yeah. It's not, you think when he was going head to head with LeBron, that's when we identified him as a winner. That's when we thought, this is a guy that can win championships. That was meaningful basketball. He is the guy that Devin Booker is warning against.
But he wasn't even an MVP contender.
You don't need that. You don't need that.
In those games that mattered on the highest stage, he was an MVP player, and that's what people remember.
His entire tenure in Indiana, I hear what you're saying, but he wasn't once in the MVP conversation like he was when he was in OKC. And even though the tenure in OKC wasn't nearly as long, and I hear what you're saying, our introduction to Paul George was Indiana. When I think of Paul George, I think of him in his Pacers jersey. That's the first look that comes to mind.
You're answering the question.
No,
that's it.
That's just what my association is with him. But when you think of his peak, when you think of when he really dove deep into his bag and you saw, dang, it wasn't the Pacers, it wasn't the system. Paul George is him. That's OKC.
No, that's when he was the best version of himself as a player.
His peak.
Okay, but I'm still with Brandon here. I think we're both
Zach.
I'm on the show like once every 3 months with them. I'm bad with names. Okay. I'm with Zach. Okay, and if Brandon thinks that Pacers are his team, I'm with Brandon too. Because at the end of the day, we're both interpreting this question as like where we associate him most with, and it's Indiana. There's no, and he's doing
that's name association. That's jersey association.
That's when he was in the conference finals, going head to head when it matters.
MVP to Giannis.
He had a good regular season. He had one good regular season.
It wasn't one good. When he was in OKC. OKC, you realize like Paul George is him, which is why
we knew that in Indiana.
No, but you knew it on a different level when he got to OKC, which is the whole reason why when the Clippers got Paul George, you were like, okay, like this is gonna bring the Clippers back, and obviously it didn't happen that way. But that's because of what he did in Oklahoma City, not what he did in Indiana.
And when Indiana lost him, you thought like, oh man, Pacers, y'all really just let that guy go.
Yeah, and
like,
exactly. He did what Devin, just to full circle this whole show, he did what Devin Booker's warning against. You're never going to get the love that you got from the team that drafted. He went chasing. He chased in OKC, chased with the Clippers, chased with the Sixers.
Another time,
he was always
as
Indiana.
You can hear.
He was always Indiana.
We're going to visit this conversation another time on Triple Threat, but if you missed anything from today's show, make sure you catch us on YouTube. Scan this QR code to make it easier for you. We are not done with this conversation. We're going to have it another week. Don't miss it.